So we made it. Welcome to episode 5 of the Value Vault. Now, today, this is the first person that I've actually gotten here, and it's Felipe. Say I pronounce it right there, Felipe.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Amazing.
That's
Amazing.
the one. But funny story, me and Felipe, it's probably around about, it's just about over a year, isn't it? I remember I connected with you on
maybe close
Instagram.
to 2 years, actually. Maybe
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Yes,
maybe.
it is actually. It
Maybe.
is.
Yeah.
It is, because it was around about the beginning of my journey of going down the route of giving value on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it was what was it? It was an engagement ad that you had out there.
Yeah.
Even
Shadow
some form of, the shadow work. And it was just resonated with everything you were sharing and just saying how much value and stuff you were giving. And straight away, it was just, as soon as I had the intention of the podcast, it was like, you've got value to give. And obviously the intention that I have within the Value Vault, it's not just an area on mindset, it's spirituality. It can be the physical element. It can be the financial, relationships, whatever it is. My intention within this is to help everybody just improve themselves in whatever way, shape or form. So what we were just discussing there, and then decided to go, right, okay, this is too good. We need to go live now. We were talking about, your journey coming into this. And I know you were talking briefly about Carl Jung. Now, before we press live, what I want you to do there, brother, just continue on from like what we were just sort of like speaking about then in terms of the journey of getting to where you are now and, the particular fields and studies in which you're actually getting yourself into, mate.
Okay, yeah. So I'll talk about just holistically where I started, because I think like everyone, there's usually a pain point, something cracks in their life and it makes someone question, hey, I've got to change my route. So I would say how I started my journey was through pain. I broke up with an ex, and there was a lot of pain there. And through that pain, it made me obviously question, like, what am I doing? Am I an unconscious zombie? Am I a robot? Am I someone that's following, mainstream narratives without even thinking? So I used that pain initially. This was, I'm 28 now, so 23, 24 years old. And that was the springboard to me trying to discover what I like, what I dislike. And what I was saying earlier to yourself, in life, it's not, people want to find their passion. And sometimes actually, weirdly enough, passion can be overrated. You might pedestalize passion way too much because you have to sacrifice throughout your life. And there's certain things that, you might not like it at the time, but you must do it,
Yeah.
And so a bit like yourself, I thought, what, let me start the Instagram, I'm not 100% sure what I like, but I'm going to experiment, trial and error, and see what flourishes. And I think for me was more the last few years learning what I don't like over what I actually like.
Yeah.
Because when you start discovering what you don't like, you get closer to what you like, let's say, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the gist of my journey. So obviously we were talking about Carl Jung. I was going to get into a little bit of detail regarding Jung himself, as why I got drawn into Jung, because obviously a lot of the new age spirituality kind of circles, you see it online, a lot of people talk about shadow work. A lot of people talk about Carl Jung. And I think there's some good reasons why, but I think some of it can be parked towards the more pop psychology element without really, and what I mean by that is maybe not enough people have enough substance around Jung.
Yeah. So like a surface level where it's almost absolutely like a trend. It's like, oh, Carl Jung like this, without actually going into the surface of what it actually is. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I was like, you know what, let me actually try and read his collected works. Let me try and, delve a little bit deeper and even understand the character, like who was Jung. So obviously before you press the record, I was mentioning that Jung had this conflict throughout his life. There was one part of him that wanted to be the scientist, to kind of show himself in that kind of light. But there was another part of him that he was kind of denying it throughout his life. As he got older, he kind of expressed it, which is, the expression was associated with mythology, associated with more his wackier concepts like synchronicity. And he was scared that throughout his life, the scientific community would deny him.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Even someone like Jung, he had his own trials and tribulations to kind of distribute the information and the data he found through different experiments he conducted with patients, pretty much. So that's kind of Jung's journey. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about a bit of shadow work. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was going to be one of the things within it, because I feel like I definitely fall into the category where it's more of the surface level understanding of his material. Because like I was saying, the only real sort of work of which I've actually heard of him is either through yourself or through Jordan Peterson, where it's talking about, you know, the shadow work. And I think for me, like I have it is such a surface level thing where I think my interpretation of it, it's like it's the other half of the self, whether it's a dark side, the shadow side. But yeah, mate, go down that end, you know, just give your sort of interpretation of what shadow work actually is.
Just a caveat, because weirdly enough, Carl Jung didn't speak about the shadow as much as people think. Like it wasn't something, because obviously because Jung didn't want to put absolute psychological models in place. He wanted throughout his work to give ideas. And so a bit like, you know, he died around 61, 62, 1961, 62. And so he wanted people in the future to kind of delve into his work and kind of evolve his work over time. He just kind of laid the template. And the key thing was, because he was a disciple of Freud. And so Freud was the first one to really, in the mainstream 120 years ago, let's say now, to talk about dreams and the importance of dreams, but how they diverge, because obviously Freud was focused more on the sexual elements, and he kind of reduced the unconscious to just repressed contents. But Jung was like, hey, there's wackier things in the unconscious. Now, going to shadow work, you've got the gist in the sense that the shadow is basically, repression is related to whether you unconsciously push something down. And then there's also a word called suppression, and that's when you consciously push something down. And so the shadow would contain two elements. So Jung was a bit, you've talked about this on your podcast. Obviously you got your subconscious, you know, your personal unconscious, pretty much. So Jung went a step further beyond Freud, and his big theory was the collective unconscious. It was related to the archetypes. You know, that's the big theory of Jung. And the collective unconscious can contain elements of the shadow, but stepping up to the personal unconscious, you can have your personal shadow associated with, let's say, you see elements that you like in someone, but you deny it within yourself. So you can call that the golden shadow, because it's not all dark. It's actually a good thing, but it's in a dark place, but it's a good thing you can retrieve.
So is the dark sense in terms of the shadow just essentially like the unconscious self? It's a thing which isn't brought to the surface, that doesn't have a light brought to it.
Exactly, correct. So the shadow is something you can't see. It doesn't necessarily mean it's something negative. It could be something actually positive. But the key idea with the shadow is it's you can't see it. It's inaccessible.
There's no light on it. There's no awareness on it to give it light. So it's the shadow. Right.
That's it. Correct. That's it.
Right. And within that as well, I know that you mentioned one thing in particular, the difference between repression and suppression. So you mentioned that when you can sort of have information coming in, it'll be repressed, or if you're consciously doing it as suppressing. What's the distinction between those two things there, and what would an example of that be to just give that awareness of like what those two key differences are?
No, good question, man. I think so. Suppression is conscious. So suppression would be in the moment you could say something, but you don't say it.
Right. Okay.
So technically, that's a very simple way to describe it. Now, repression is a lot more complicated because it's beyond your power.
Right.
So you've seen obviously famously a chart of an iceberg, pretty much, and it shows the ego, and then it's like the unconscious is this big abyss that goes all the way down. So imagine your ego is like a boat in the sea. You know, you've got control, so you can control your fate a little bit. But in reality, there's bigger forces at work. Which is, you can call it deep down the collective unconscious. Now, the repression bit is interesting. you don't, so in Jung's theory, you don't have control over that part. The key thing you have control is when, let's say, a certain feeling comes up. So Jung would apply a lot of mythological concepts onto the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So his key theme was looking at the patterns in all mythos and the grand religions and how they kind of intertwine.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's a great example. When someone falls in love, and in Greek mythos, you know, you can say the idea eros, Cupid shoots the arrow, ping, shoots the arrow. You didn't choose to fall in love. It was something deeply unconscious that arose. It was something that was out of your control. But you gain obviously conscious awareness when you recognize, oh, I've got strong feelings. Yeah, I've got strong. That's when it becomes conscious. But you never chose that feeling in the first place, you see?
Wow.
So I would describe it as, if you've got self-awareness in your journey, it's like you don't control the undercurrents underneath, but you control the action.
But right, okay,
yeah. So when it becomes conscious, so it's in
your
this
response to it.
So when Cupid shoots that arrow, it's like, okay, I ain't got, you know, that's the little god within.
Yeah.
And Cupid shoots, I'm in love with this, you know, this bird or whatever.
Yeah.
But you've got a choice to how you react to that arrow, see? And if you don't have self-awareness, that draws you into certain situations. And now that gets into another topic regarding, you know, trauma, inner child stuff. But let's leave that aside. I think that's more like Jung again. Mythology kind of tells the human story. It tells, you know, the story about me, you, universal humankind, and that's what he kind of tried to lay out through, you know, his psychological as a model, but understand.
So with that as well, that's actually really powerful within that. And I love how just getting a different take from sort of like different philosophies and different sort of viewpoints and studies and stuff, how they ultimately are sort of collectively seeing the same thing. It's just from a different perspective. But I love this because I've never actually thought of it from that way, you know, in a sense of, for me with the mind, it's 5% of the behavior is conscious, 95% of it is unconscious. And I've never actually thought of it of that sense in a case of, I actually can't really control what comes up because it's unconscious. It will just happen. The only thing that I can do is have that awareness, have that sense of, from my experience with it, it's almost being able to just step back from the thought and not just getting indulged and wrapped in it. It's becoming inquisitive. Like this is one thing that I see it with a few people when, you know, last year I was experiencing depression, you know, and anxiety and stuff, and it's not good and it's not bad. Like, I'm grateful for it because I know for me to be able to truly help people, I can't help somebody do something if I haven't went through that. You know, to its core, it would just be just intellectual, surface level, regurgitated information, like do this, do that. Now, I know that within me, I know one of the biggest things about it is to not identify with what's happening, not just to allow it to consume your consciousness, but it really just practicing that skill of, you know, just being able to just step back from it and become curious with it. Like, why is my response to either this person or this event or this experience this thing? Like, why is anger coming up with here? Why am I feeling, ultimately, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? You know, just becoming curious about it.
Yes.
So within that, obviously, I don't know how far in depth you've gotten within that, but I really do understand that, you know, through the works of Joe Dispenza, I know that you were saying that, you know, you're getting the neuroscience and stuff. That's what you're currently getting into. Was it neuroscience? Is that what you said?
Yes. I'm studying about the neuroscience.
So I know that with Joe Dispenza, you know, his material, it's all about, you know, making the unconscious conscious, you know, like in relation to the shadow, where it's, you know, shedding light to the shadow side of self. So within that, what would you say would be a powerful, either like a practical guide or just, you know, just like further like insight or practical steps that people can actually take away, because we understand how much that influences our behavior, how much of a part it actually plays in the manifestation of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. So what would you say would be some like more light shed within that, and, you know, practical steps for people to actually work with that and become more aware?
Yeah, no, good question, man. I would say, because there's a few things you can think about. So obviously journaling is a big thing really in
Hmm.
our community anyway. So I think journaling is a great way to kind of, remove that psychological baggage you're carrying,
Yeah.
because sometimes it sounds so simple, but just getting a pen to paper, it's
Hmm.
amazing. You start,
Yeah.
getting your thoughts and like, oh, okay, and that makes a little bit of sense when I start
Hmm.
writing it down. So one tool is just journaling. I would say another tool would be a bit of dream analysis if possible. And again, you don't want to get into the territory of buying a dream book that says, oh, this symbol means this. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, scratch that, because that's not
Yeah.
true. You're firstly, a symbol to you may mean something a bit more nuanced to,
Yeah.
for example, a church. How I view the church in my mind might be a bit more nuanced to how you view the
Yeah.
church in your mind.
Hmm.
So they're going to mean slightly different things.
Yeah.
So, but I would suggest dream analysis is definitely a good great gateway. I wouldn't overly, every night.
Analyze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely if a dream pops up and it's unusual,
Yeah.
and you think,
I've done that a
that's,
few times where it has came up and I'm just
yeah,
like, what does that actually like mean? And
yes,
I think you know which dreams it is because they just tend to stick when you wake up and it's just like,
yeah,
what was that actually
yes.
about?
Yes, and I would say something I learned over time. I do think it's a little bit of a waste of time to analyze every single dream,
Yeah.
because I did that for a period of time, and then most of your dreams, I wouldn't say much, but quite a lot of your dreams is process of information. Really,
Hmm.
that's what's going on. But you do get those sprinkles of gold where a dream pops up and it's archetypal, and it's a bit like, oh wow, like I've never seen this before, never, and what's going on here?
Hmm.
So I think the key thing I'm trying to, speak about is more dream analysis is very key in terms of helping you become more self-aware. So a very simple tool is, when you wake up, you forget your dream. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
5 minutes later, I can't remember this dream.
Hmm.
So I would suggest, if you got your phone next to you, for example, you could voice record straight away. That's what I used to do sometimes. Voice record, so I can be like, when I wake up, I'm like, this dream's really weird. Let me get my phone. Let me
Yeah.
record
And
what,
just
so I can
capture it.
remember. Or I can journal the dream straight away. That's what I'll do.
Nice.
So that's another tool.
Yeah.
And then probably the third one, again, there's moments in your life when you mentioned, you might get annoyed. So technically you're projecting in that moment, and you're projecting and it's down to you to kind of recognize that now, I'm feeling a certain way.
Hmm.
And it's now, this is on a very simple level, being a bit more mindful with your approach,
Yeah.
capturing the feeling before, it
Before it goes
explodes.
out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So I think that'd be the third tool, just staying self-aware, and it can be hard, you know.
Hmm.
I'm not perfect. You're not. No
Yeah.
one's perfect in this world, but I
Definitely.
think it's very key to be aware of what feelings come up, and just be inquisitive. You don't need to be inquisitive in that moment in time, but at
Hmm.
least after you come back home, whether you had an argument with someone, you come back home and you reflect on it, you meditate on it a little bit, and you
Yeah.
think, oh, why did I do that?
Hmm.
So I think those three things are paramount, to be honest.
Nice. I love that. And touching on the regards to the dreams, it's funny that you say that. I've got my journal there, and I actually had a dream this morning, and it's fascinating how that was one of the points that you came across because it's something which I've only just started really doing because I know that within sort of like a dream, it is more of a sense of, well, I mean, from like my understanding anyway, which is very, very surface level. It's all just like the unconscious parts of self, just sort of like playing out and acting out. And what I'd found in a dream that I actually had recently, what I found is a common denominator. I'll find in the dream that I'm always financially restricted. And it'll be a sense of, I really want to do something in the dream, but there's something that's holding me back. I just can't do it. I can't afford it, or I'm not yet. Just that's one of the main things which sort of came out. And I journaled on it straight away. I just woke up and I'd done my routine because I usually wake up and I'll study.
Yeah.
And I went straight into a journaling session, which I usually do after I've studied, because then my mind's just open and, really just like going, okay, well, how does this now apply to me? Which it's something which I'm only just starting to do.
Yeah.
And by the way, for anybody, when it comes to journaling, it was so uncomfortable for me at the beginning. I had so much resistance. I used to get frustrated with it. And the only thing that I could say with it is just detach the ego. Nobody's going to see it. Just get whatever's in you on there, and it will naturally sort of pick up with time. So I do agree that that is such a powerful tool for people. And I remember journaling about the dream, and it was just getting it written down straight away. It's just immediately identifying an unconscious program in which I'm operating with, where it's clearly around the lack of being able to create, like financial security and, financial freedom in my life. So within that, I am curious to know, what is your interpretation of a dream? I don't know whether your studies ever gone down that route, but
No, because unfortunately academia is very materialist. It's
right,
very focused, and it kind of dismisses the spiritual, which is
spiritual element of it, right?
and so, personally for myself, like how I'm wired as well, I kind of rebel a little bit against that. I'm a bit like,
Yeah,
no, even your modes of psychotherapy is not the greatest as well.
yeah,
Anyways, so from my studies, not really. It's more a mixture of personal experience. Actually, saying that, I did a course on psychodynamic counseling for a year, but that focuses more on Freud's thought rather than
yeah,
Jung's thought. So it did teach me a little bit, but not too much.
nice.
And then just reading a ton of Jung and just trying to get sources
Yeah,
online as well.
background.
It's just quite
One
holistic.
thing that I am curious of, because you have said the name a couple of times, archetypes.
Yeah.
I want to, that is something which I am curious about, getting more into the realm of having an understanding. So what is our archetypes, and how do they sort of like influence us and impact us?
Yeah, no, that's another good question. I would, people define it in slightly different ways, but I think it's like the ultimate personification of a certain ideal, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's a famous one in terms of, men love Gladiator Maximus.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, look, Maximus is technically like an ideal of the masculine,
Mm-hmm.
And you can analyze why Maximus is an archetype of the masculine, but there's something when you watch the film Gladiator, you watch it and you kind of just resonate with the character, and you just feel, oh, what a guy, he's a quality, what a man. So there's a reason why these like sensations or feelings or thoughts pop up, and so when you analyze Maximus, there's an element of classic ideals related to sacrifice, classic ideals related to loyalty, classic ideals related to goodness. He was uncorruptible, really. And he was seeking for justice. And these are like also kind of virtues, And so an archetype is basically, you can say, also a symbolic representation of these key virtues that manifest throughout humanity. So hopefully, that just makes sense.
Yeah, nice. And within archetypes as well, do they tend to be, is there a limited number of them, whereby the sort of like like a collective sort of like of individual personas and virtues, like you were saying, which collectively create almost like a self-image, so to speak, or a virtue, or like an archetype? Are they sort of like a limited amount? Are they known and familiar archetypes which tend to provide a structure and category?
I think because Jung tried to be perennialist, he tried to be quite universal in terms of his approach. I'm not really like that. I do think there is the truth or an ultimate truth, I would say, but he tried to he wouldn't say everything's the same, but he tried to make it as equal as it can be. So my point being is, let's say the psyche evolves over time, a bit like in evolutionary theory, our biology evolves. So there must be psychologically, because man evolves over time, there must be certain modes of being that are more optimal for survival, let's say, or more optimal to create civilization. Human beings have been around for obviously thousands and thousands of years. So there must be a certain way of being that allows civilization to thrive. So I would say it's not particularly like, let's say, going back to Gladiator and Maximus. It's not Maximus is the specific archetype. It's what he represents. It's the symbol. So someone else could be another type of symbol of the masculine, but he's not, let's say, Maximus. Exactly. So it's kind of it can be, the archetype can be represented in different images, different like metaphors, different ways of symbolism. So that's the way to describe, I would say, an archetype, really.
Nice. And do you feel within that as well that to achieve certain things in life and to do certain things in life, a certain archetype is required in order to manifest that as a result?
I would suggest, it's actually quite a tough question, because I don't think, like I mentioned earlier, you don't kind of force the archetypes. It's like on the collective unconscious level, it happens to you, let's say. And so one thing you can do on, moving beyond Jung's theory for a second, it's on a very practical level. Are you taking action? Are you disciplined? Are you aiming up? Have you got a vision? Have you got goals? And within your idiosyncratic journey, it's obviously going to teach you specific lessons about yourself. But weirdly enough, because you're taking action, there's also going to be archetypal lessons that you have to learn throughout life, you see.
Nice.
And so, and that, so my point being is you don't force, you can't just say, I'm going to be, it's like, you're going to have a particular goal in life that's, suited to what you want to do. And let's say I'm going to have a particular goal or goals in life that's suited to what I want to do in life. So I think it's kind of bringing it down. I think that'd be a way to kind of describe it. So, but I would say there is like ultimate personifications of, if you're aiming to be a good person in this world, there's, that's where religions kick in. It's like religions offer, very key archetypes that are actually really important to kind of realize this is a super high ideal. For example, let's say Jesus Christ. You can just see it. Forget about whether you believe in Christianity, for example, but just see it as an idea. It's a super high ideal to reach. But hey, let me put that as the top of my mountaintop. Let me at least try and be as Christ-like with my actions. So nice. Again, that's also another way to kind of see archetypes as well. But you kind of have to be you a little bit. You just have to kind of.
Absolutely. I think I get that. It's almost like it's sort of like an ideal.
Yes.
That's the ideal, and understanding that I'm never going to be the ideal, but the purpose is to carve and go down a path whereby I'm trying to embody the virtues of the ideal as best as can, understanding that we're never going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. One thing within that, and I was going to ask about, a question on religion, because I know that a lot of your work, I know that you've recently just been traveling, and the churches and the places that you've been, it's just architectural beauty, the way that it looks. Obviously, I am very keen to sort of like hear your perception on it. But one thing within it, which is just coming up so many times now, it's like, it's almost it's too hard to even dismiss the conversation of when we talk about Christ or Jesus, because lately, and I do feel like there's a collective shift happening in the world within consciousness. And I know that, they talked about it in, I think it was the Second Amendment, when it was essentially the times that we're living in now was what was described as when, Christ would actually return. And I am hearing so much more about just the word Jesus. And I'm hearing so many people talk about it. I'm becoming so open-minded to it. And you just mentioned it there. And I'm just like, it can't be avoided. Like, what is your like views on religion, and how, how it almost like impacts and influences the life that we can live and create?
There's too much to say, man. It would be another hour or 2 hours us talking about it. But in a way, I think this is part of what I do as well. I focus on helping people awaken, let's say, whether through practical steps or through my analytical work online. But I would say, from personal understanding and just a lot of research, I do think religion is kind of the pinnacle of ideology, and I would suggest, from my personal take, below religion, there's pseudo religions. We don't need to get into particular ideologies of the modern age, but that'd be a way to frame it. So then the next question is, why do I view it in that way? I would say religion has, in my opinion, good religion has an element of spiritual discipline. It has an element of moving away from sin, moving away from, let's say, from the Buddhist lens, desire, and also illusion, Maya. And I believe these are tenets that are, especially in the West, man, it's like, it's a cultural amnesia, past 10 years, 20 years, it's kind of, even though you've talked about there's kind of a sort of small renaissance that's occurring, the majority of people still asleep to the absolute importance of these ideas, because they're not, because people have, talking about my studies, people always have this materialist hat. It must be, literally real. It's like, okay, let's push that to one side, whether something's literally real. Imagine, going back to the Christ point, imagine if humanity embodied the Christ ideal. What would happen to society? What would happen to the world? Would the world objectively be a better place, or would the world be a worse place? I would argue, well, Christ was a good dude, Islam adopted him as a prophet. The Eastern mystics see him as a guru. Christianity obviously sees divinity in Christ. There's a holistic, even atheists, he's a decent guy, So my point bringing that up is more like, hey, there's going back to the archetypal element, there's ideals that can be achieved if people just looked at religions and weren't so resentful towards it, let's say, or they just saw it for what it was and understood, now, like, these are good ways of being, like good methods of teaching, like turn the other cheek. It's powerful. It stops, the eye for an eye, conflict, let's say. But linking also Christ, I don't know, obviously here's a famous one in Carl Jung circles. I don't know if you heard of the book Ion, but this book has been obviously, maybe overly glamorized, let's say, but Ion was related to Jung's prophecy about the Antichrist. It's a very strange book. So it kind of is in his collected works 9 from my memory. And a lot of people have commentated over it, but he kind of links it to this will be interesting to yourself, I think. The astrological Ion. And let's say, the pyramids and the geometrical accuracy and how it tells us about the alignment of the stars. Jung's theory was like, these last 2,000 years was the Ion of Christ. It was just the Ion of Christ. And it's been symbolized by the fish, the water bearer. And so he's saying, look, we're getting close. When he wrote the book, he was like, we're getting close to the end of this Ion. And so we're going to see some sort of antichrist ideas that are going to pop up. And so if you understand, obviously, Jung, and you just ground Jung as much as possible, just ground it before it gets too abstract. It's like, well, he was focused on ideas in the mind, particularly in the collective unconscious. And now imagine an idea like, let's say, Jesus Christ, that spread throughout humanity. How aware were people in terms of what the ideal really means? I don't think many, I would suggest. So he was trying to look for patterns in reality, pretty much. He was trying to decipher the collective patterns in reality. And so as we're entering a new Ion, he's saying, look, this is a time where there's going to be some sort of Antichrist kind of energy. It might be personified by someone that represents the Antichrist. It might be personified by just the ideas that are represented in society. So I'm not saying that as truth or gospel, but I'm saying it is a very interesting idea that even Carl Jung proposed something related to the Antichrist.
And is the Antichrist, is the Antichrist, is it literally just in the name, it's against Christ, it's against what it sort of like represents and stuff?
Yes. So like, you've got certain values, know, let's say, Christianity has the values like that. Antichrist just flips it.
Just flips it, like with the cross as well, because obviously that's when it's flipped, right?
So it just completely flips all the values, what Christian ideals, it will flip it and reverse it. That's and then and when those ideals are common, you're living in the anti-Christian age, let's say.
I think that's so fascinating as well, because I know that for me, when I was younger, like when I was in secondary school, I know one of the biggest things, I was sucked into that. And I think when it came onto the religion of Islam, you look at the movement, like all of the anti-Islamics and stuff like that, without going too political, I was sucked into it. And when I think about it from that sense, it was all I was, and this really proves, our perception is our reality. All I was perceiving, all I was aware of was all of the negative concepts of the religion, and just being so blissfully ignorant to, the actual, like, the beauty that it actually represents. And so how would you see that there then is, how would you say that's actually affecting the world at the moment in terms of that way of being? Because I do agree that a lot of people are embodying the Antichrist, or whatever people want to call it, whether it's Antichrist, whether it's just being blatantly ignorant and unconsciously incompetent and just serving and living in a way of love and faith and respect ultimately. So how would you say that here is demonstrating and displaying itself in the world today?
Yeah, no, it's again a complicated topic, because obviously holistically the world has different ideologies and different paradigms, that certain cultures view the world from. I would suggest, obviously, focusing on the West. Again, like I mentioned, there's a cultural amnesia, and I again, if you look into patterns of history, because I've made discussions about the Age of Enlightenment around the 16th century, and that was part of the Protestant Reformation at the same time. And so obviously I'm not against Protestantism, but I'm against the iconoclastic removal, symbolism, removal, the archetypal structure of Christianity. And long story short, that's kind of made it very fundamentalist Christianity. That part of Christianity, it's made it very, the Bible says this and you will go to hell. It's like that. Hey, that's not really Christianity, my friend. That's not really Christianity. So going back to the Antichrist element, I think if you bring in Jung in, Jung was trying to be as grounded as he could be to understand the objective truths of mythos, and then understanding that there are forces at work that are beyond our will. That's the classical term of religion, religio. It's related to forces beyond our will, experiences beyond our will. We don't have control. Just linking it to, you were mentioning earlier about the cathedrals, the grand cathedrals I've been to. I went to Eastern Europe, and they have Orthodox Christianity, and it's very symbolic, it's very expressive, it's very beautiful, it's very like undeniable. It's like divinity is there. You can't, it's wow, And so bringing all of that back into like Antichrist, I don't know if, obviously I've got no idea if this is anti-Christian age or not, but you can see the seeds in the sense that there is a part of society is forgotten / rebelling / thinking science can solve all the questions about the big existential questions of humanity. There's obviously been the big theme of the meaning crisis as well in society. Mental health has been on the rise. So I don't think I'm answering your question. So bring me back on track. But I think in terms of trying to ground, because this is the problem.
How do you feel like somebody would be able to identify if they are, so, because it is quite it is sort of like a big scope sort of question within it. So to sort of like dissect it, one, what advice or what practical steps or just what sort of wisdom would you be able to, or value would you be able to give somebody to, one, embody more of the virtues, or like the positives, if we want to label it a word, the positive side of the whole element of religion and what it is actually sort of supposed to preach? And how can somebody identify when they're acting out of harmony with the divinity, or with whatever we want to label it? Does that make sense in terms of that?
Yes, I think one way I can answer it is, what is your God? What God have you put on a pedestal? Because classical religion would say the God is, you call it the sacred, it's something beyond, it's a universal creator. We don't know what, we can't actually see, even though in Christianity it's symbolized as the Father. It's a symbol, a bit like the Holy Spirit symbolized by a dove. It's not, the Holy Spirit's not literally a dove that flies around us, but it's a symbol.
It's a symbol.
Yes. So I would say one question I would ask people is, what is your God? And if someone replies, I don't believe in gods, it's like, well, what do you do all the time? What is, do you Are you watching all TV all the time? Do you watch a particular show all the time that doesn't actually benefit your self-development journey? Because in actual symbolic, mythological, religious terms, that's your God.
That's your God.
That's your God. And so people have to realize this is the trap that, again, I'm not anti-atheist, but I think there's an absolute trap in being in the atheistic mindset. It's very good at picking holes on the other side of the coin because it doesn't stand on anything. You know, it can pick holes against Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, but blah blah blah. But atheism is more like, the question I would ask atheists would be like, but what's your replacement? You know, what paradigm can you offer that's better than grand mythos? You know, and the problem is there's nothing. That's the issue. So people then get attached to this is what I was talking about earlier, pseudo religions. You know, ideologies that they don't have the philosophical, spiritual complexity to help with, let's say, reaching that archetypal hill, that mountain. They don't have it. You know, and again, I don't need to list the Western ideologies today, but the ideology has been purported, it completely lacks wisdom. You know, it doesn't have timeless wisdom, because wisdom is something ancient. It's timeless. You know, our forefathers will tell, you know, when you have children one day, you speak to your son like, hey, son, you know, you should be careful of this. That's you spreading wisdom. You know, that's you using your experience to help your child. And so the culture doesn't have any of that, but religion obviously had those seeds. And so I would say, now just wrapping it up, it's, what is your God? Just what is it? It could be anything.
What is your, I knew as soon as you were talking about the Netflix, I had a feeling that's what you were going to say. Like, that's what you got. And I love that. And the more that I actually just think about it, it's essentially a goddess, just sort of like an ideal that you're sort of moving towards. It's something which is giving you a sense of direction, something which is, you know, ultimately just giving you something that you're moving towards fundamentally. And it's like, what are you doing most of the time? What is that thing that you get most excited about? Like, what is that thing that's captivating and cultivating the energy? And is it Netflix? Is it drugs? Is it alcohol? What's that thing that you go to? Is a sense of either relief or feeling like more connected to yourself? Like, what is that thing that you are going towards? Like, is it a joint? Is it cocaine? Is it alcohol? Is it Netflix? Is it a book? Like, identifying what it actually is. And within that, I know I was listening to a podcast the other day, and you know, it made me laugh, and it does make me realize just how stagnant as a race we are, you know, for the masses, in terms of lack of, you know, just lack of study and lack of use of our intellect, lack of just using our creative faculties for what they're actually meant to be used for. And you know, in the podcast, the man had said he was reciting something from a book, and he said the mind of Thomas Edison created the light bulb. You know, the brain of Thomas Edison was used to, you know, create the inflandescent, however you pronounce it, light bulb. You know, you had Alexander Graham Bell, who, you know, created the telephone. You know, and then you had the Wright brothers, who were bicycle mechanics, and they, you know, they were the people to get us off the ground and into the air, and, you know, create the plane. You know, they use their brains to do those things. And it's, what are you using your brain for? To watch Netflix? And I do think it's about all good things in moderation. You know,
absolutely,
it's all about that element of, you know, just moderation, macro, micro. But on it, what is your God? What is that thing that you are devoting the most of your time to? Is it an idealistic virtue? Is it yourself in 10, 15, 20 years time? Is it, you know, what Christ represented? Is, like, what is it? And I really do feel, and I did speak about this, I think it was the second episode, where it was create or disintegrate. You know, if you don't use it, you lose it. And if you don't have something that you have as a virtue, something which is symbolic in terms of a meaning of, you know, this here for me means X, Y, and Z, and that's what you're collectively moving towards. I think if we're not doing that, which is what I think is the major part to the mental health crisis. It's that if you don't have something, whether that is a God, whether that is an ideal, whether that is whatever it is, if you don't have that, then you know what Napoleon Hill talks about it in Outwitting the Devil. It was that the devil creeps into a stagnant mind. And if you don't have something which is occupying that part of your mind, whether it is a vision, whether it is an ideal, like whatever the God is, if you don't have that, then what you are inviting into your mind is the devil being the negative. It's the decay, it's the decline, it's the destruction. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. And I go back to modern day culture, you know, in terms of, again, I've mentioned materialism earlier, just that idea, just having that perspective on life. It's like, well, a culture has to be bonded by something higher. There has to be like a unifying mythos. So historically, obviously, United Kingdom, England would be unified. Hey, look, the English flag has a cross. Why? Obviously Christianity. Scotland has a cross like that. It's a St. Andrew's cross, I think. And so that's the unifying mythos historically. Now, you can tell in the West, we're losing our orientation a little bit. And it's like, hey, what's going, like, and you can sense it in the air. It doesn't need to be explicit. No one's talking about it, but you can sense in the air, maybe in our lifetime, there's going to be some radical shifts, you know, because you do need a collective to be unified. And we've got too much disintegration. And so as an individual, this is one thing I would say, as an individual, this is part of being self-aware, catching yourself. This is what Jung would call the collective shadow as well, a little bit, you know. And you have to be aware that, are you getting dragged into that collective shadow, that bit that people are not really aware of at the moment, that movement towards something. We don't know what that thing is, but kind of catch yourself and realize, you know, going back to what you were saying, what is your God as well? Like I can actually reorientate myself towards something better for my life. I don't, you know, everything in moderation. Of course, there's nothing wrong with having the odd drink there. There's nothing wrong with, you know, having fun with friends. Fun is important. That's part of life, but you do have to be disciplined, and you do have to sacrifice. That's the key words, because there's not enough of that words being discussed really. Sacrifice. You know, you got to sacrifice something. Even bringing a family to this world, it's a sacrifice. You know, having kids, of course it is. So yeah, no, you're 100%, man. 100% right.
What do you think then within that are some, from all of the studying that you've got, and ultimately all of the value and knowledge that you've actually got within this, it really is incredible. So with what you see in the world today, and just seeing people who are just wandering generalities, you know, they are that ship without the sail. You know, they've just got no direction. They just don't have any awareness, just going through life completely unconsciously and consciously incompetent. You know, they just don't know. You know, they don't know that they don't know. And what would you say then, through, you know, what we've talked about in terms of, you know, like archetypal behavior, and then having like the ideals and the virtues of like religion and Christianity and stuff like that, what would you say would be some practical takeaway steps from whoever's listening to this now, who's thinking, right, I think everything what you were saying right now, I just feel expanded. I feel like you have, you know, you've given me seeds of like awareness and intrigue, and, you know, I'm starting to feel more awake to it. What would you give as some like practical takeaways for whoever's listening to this to, you know, apply in any way what you've sort of shared and what you know, to, you know, begin them and help aid them and support them on their journey of just becoming a better version of themselves, whether that be physically, mentally, spiritually, in the relationships, whatever it is. What would you see are some practical steps for somebody to take away, to apply, to embody, to experience, to ultimately improve the quality of the life in any way?
I think you've discussed this many times as well yourself. It's going back to the drawing boards, being clear with a vision in life, you know, because you have to have a vision. And I would also suggest as well, even, you know, there was a meme going around about, why do men think about the Roman Empire? I don't know if you
yeah
it's like, why do men think about the Roman Empire? It's hilarious, isn't it? Yeah. And it's like, well, and obviously there's connotations associated with, you know, maybe it's the conscious in terms of people thinking about, you know, the downfall of the Roman Empire, and are we
Yeah.
going to a downfall, and
Yeah.
what do we do about it? It's like, well, what do you do is do something, do something productive, and it still goes back to the basics. There's no magic pill. There's no, even though, you know, I love mythos, I love the spiritual, I love the unknown in that way. You have to really anchor yourself back down to earth and really ground yourself and say, look, there's no magic pill, my friend. It's action, it's discipline, it's goals, it's having a vision, it's being the beacon of light when other people are not beacons of light, you know, because you have to, in life, you know, you're not meant to help everyone, you know, it's impossible. You know, some people, and it is what it is. I'm not saying it in a patronizing way, an egoic way. It's just life. You know, when Christ came to the world, he was, even Christ, not everyone could see who Christ was, even at that time. So he's performing all these miracles, and there was people denying him, you know. So it's like, it doesn't, you're not meant to help everyone. And some people are not doomed, but some people will not succeed in life, you know, and that's fine. So, but I would suggest regardless of all of that, you should always be a beacon of hope to your friends, your family members. Still always be that rock, you know. And again, you've said this yourself. I think you said this. You know, surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people that want to elevate. You know, you can still have your home for. You know, I'm good friends with friends at home. You know, but some of them are not trying to like elevate. So obviously, I want to be focused with people that really want to elevate. So really, just strip it to the basics. There's no magic pill, man.
Nice, I love that. And within that, there, then, so with, you know, the awareness that you've gotten and accumulated and, you know, continue to accumulate, you know, when we first got on, it was just sort of, you know, you're getting to 28 now, you know, it's your 29th birthday on Monday, you know, and within that, what's some things, I feel like a lot of people who will be listening to this are of the age where they're sort of like 20s to 30s and then edging into the 40s, and obviously as this starts to like grow, that demographic will, you know, it will increase. It might already be increasing, I don't know, I'm not technically advanced to understand metrics of anything yet. But within that, what would be some of the advice? Because obviously I know that when we talked about, you know, earlier in the conversation, when we talked about dreams, you know, finding that balance of, don't just find yourself in like analysis paralysis of just, you know, I've fell into that where it's just a wormhole that you find yourself in. With, you know, the knowledge that you're starting to acquire now, what would be, you know, the advice that you would give, you know, to your younger self who is sort of like at that stage where, you know, coming to the end of the ignorance, you know, just the lack of knowledge of this stuff, you know, knowing what you know now, what would be the advice that you would give yourself, you know, like at that sort of like stage in it?
Yeah, that's actually quite a hard question, man. I would, if I was trying to give myself advice in terms of, if, you know, moving away from ignorance, I would, because obviously I mentioned in terms of pain is usually the gateway towards some sort of light, you know. So when I was going through some painful stages in my life, it's always remaining on track, not staying stuck in the abyss. I think there's, you know, certain people, there's the adage of you either sink or swim in life, you know. And how many, let's say if you were a Navy SEAL, an Army guy, you know, those guys, you know, they experience really harsh things in the Army terrain. And so when they come back home, it's like, will they sink or swim, you know? And so life is, again, it can be quite black and white in that sense, even though it's obviously there's nuance in between. But my advice to myself would be, look, don't sink, man. Keep swimming. Just keep moving forward. And you know, you might cry a few tears. You might be angry. You might be annoyed. You might, you know, feel certain emotions that might think you're trapped for a little bit of time. But don't remain in that illusion of the trap. And again, that keeps you, you know, locked up in a particular way, because there are certain people that get locked in with emotions and feelings, and it's very important to feel, obviously, but I think here's another thing in our modern day paradigm. It's the overemphasis of, when you don't feel too well, you know, stay in bed, you know. If you don't feel too good, then I think that's not good at all. I think it's really important to really push through. Like, if you want to become, again, talking about Christ, when Christ was on the cross, he was obviously, he's God, but he had to go through that torture. It wasn't like he absolutely enjoyed it. You know, he was tortured. If you've seen the Passion scene, it's bloody, it's raw, it's not nice. If you're human, you connect with it. You're like, oh my, this is the most victimless man in arguably history, and he went through that. So again, it goes back to that word of sacrifice. So don't let your feelings kind of trap you in the abyss. Just keep moving forward, keep taking action, and you'll see the horizon. You'll see like the beautiful clouds and the sun and the rays that will come out. So that's my advice.
Nice.
Definitely take action.
I love that. And it is definitely something which I also share the same viewpoint. Obviously, I do feel like rest, you know, in certain areas of life is a requirement, but I feel like there's almost a trend where a lot of people, when they sort of feel burnt out, when they feel depressed, when they feel down, you know, the antidote, if it isn't take a pill, it's just chill out, put on Netflix, you know, just rest. And it's like, I'm of the belief where, you know, we're growth centric beings. We're designed to literally grow, to evolve, to progressively realize a worthy ideal, whatever that is. And when we aren't doing that, from my experience, especially, this is what I spoke about in a podcast the other day. Every time I'm not doing that, every time I'm not progressively realizing towards a worthy ideal, every time I'm doing the opposite, whether that's in the form of procrastination, whether that's in the form of scrolling or overindulging in certain things, whether that be food, whether that be Netflix as such, or scrolling, every time I do those things, it's always the common denominator for whenever my mental or emotional state is feeling low. And it's the awareness. And I do feel like that is often the remedy for people. It's like, oh, just relax, just chill out. And I do feel like in times in life that is a necessary requirement.
Of course.
But I do feel like for the masses, an antidote and a vaccine for the masses is quite simply what you were saying. You know, it's know yourself. You know, that's why that is one of the most commonly known verses, like know thyself. You know, who am I? You know, how have I actually been operating? What is my sort of like current way of just being? You know, how am I actually going about during the day? But then once you've got that awareness of where am I, who am I, it's like, okay, now where do I want to be? Who do I actually want to be? What virtues do I actually want to start to, you know, embody on a day-to-day basis? What do I actually want to progressively realize, you know, as my ideal? Whether like, what is my God going to be? You know, what is that thing? And I do feel like the reason why there's an epidemic going on in the world where, you know, the mental health crisis is on such a decline. And, you know, my own experience within this that got me on this path was having my own mom go through it, have the panic attack, and me just being ignorant as to how to even operate in that situation. Like, why is this actually happening? It was terrifying in the moment. And I've understood it more and more clearly because that got me down the path of studying the mind, understanding how we work, how we operate, cause and effects, you know, why, like Emerson, you know, one thing that he said in regards to sort of like laws of the universe, fundamental, quantifiable laws which govern the way things happen. It's cause and effect being the law of laws. And I think when we just have that objective view of, okay, what are my known effects in life right now? Meaning, what are the things that I can tangibly see as a result? You know, what is happening? What is things that I've manifested in life? What are my known effects? And when we've got that sense of awareness, okay, well, if my known effect is depression, if it's feeling lost, if it's lack of clarity, if it's feeling overwhelmed, if it's feeling an incredible amount of anxiety or stress, because we all feel stress, we all feel anxiety, they're healthy to a degree because we need them, you know. But when we find that those things are more our emotional home and they aren't just a temporary, you know, feeling, they are our habitual way of feeling. I feel like when it's at that point, if anxiety or depression and stress is your habitual dominant way of actually feeling, then the answer isn't chill out. It's the polarity. It's what you were saying. It's knuckle down, listen to yourself, understand yourself, and create the goal. Give yourself a direction. Give yourself something to move towards so that whenever you are taking the action towards it, you're feeling a sense of purpose because you're waking up and now suddenly things have meaning because, okay, why am I getting up and out of bed today? Well, it's because it's the ideal. It's the God. It's this thing that I'm actually moving towards. And I do feel like that is the main problem that is going on in the world right now. Just so many people, like what you were saying about atheists, it's like, well, okay, great, but what is your replacement of God? Like, what is that thing that's giving you that
Yep.
sense of direction, of something
Yep.
to actually have and hold on to?
Yep.
I just think it's so relevant within that.
Yeah, yeah, and going back to your point as well, it's people want to overcomplicate the process. I think again, I'm thinking of like elements of the spirituality community as well. It's like, you know, even the Buddha, when he reached enlightenment, and as the story goes, there was rational insight. He took action. You know, he did ascetic practices to, you know, get, and he became really skinny. And he was like, oh, this is not good. Let me try something else. And obviously, the story, you know, he became enlightened under the tree. But I think the key thing, me referencing that point, people act like they are enlightened. Let's say that word in, like, I don't know whether, you know, you can really become enlightened, let's say, but when you're aiming for that ideal to be enlightened, it's like you do realize you take action every single way. It's just pure, it's just action. Like karma is action. Like there's no, you can't run away from that. And again, it's the illusion of the mind, the illusion of, again, like dreams is an absolute abyss. And if you are stuck in dream world, let's say, and you're analyzing every dream and over, you know, analysis paralysis, as you said, that's going to keep you trapped. Paradoxically, it's going to keep you stuck. So, and then also, even beyond me saying that, is you've discussed this yourself, it's, you've got to move your body. You know, you've got to do something with your body. It's like every morning, most mornings I'll go for a long walk, and then I'll have a cold shower. And then I usually make myself a little coffee. But I feel amazed. Like if I do that, my mind is clear. If I don't do that, I'm a bit more like, oh, you know, I'm not so clear with my thoughts, let's say. I can still get on with things. But the point being is, it's a very simple solution. I went for a walk. I had a cold shower. Do I like the cold showers? Nah, I don't like the cold showers, man. Sometimes I'm there like 5 minutes. Like, oh, this is but I get in either way. I get in, just, you know, enjoy it. You know, after, I feel good. And these are like important things that it goes back to those essentials: discipline, action. It's like you can't run away from that, you know.
Nice.
And so
I love that. And a final one within that, because it is definitely something which I did get in that state where, and I've never actually sort of like thought about that when it came to sort of like Buddha, where it was a case of, you know, the weight was lost, and it was almost as a sense of, because he neglected the other element of which what we are, which is the body. You know, it still requires an element of, you can't just be in your mind, because if you do, the body will decay, it'll disintegrate within it.
yes.
And so with that there, then, what do you feel within people? Do you feel like, because people can literally just be caught in the mental loop of not even thinking, because, you know, there was a quote and a statistic where, you know, we tend to confuse thinking with mental activity, and the quote goes, only 2% of people think, 3% of people think they think, and 95% of people would rather die than think. You know, and so do you feel like with a lot of people, it is a case of just being lost in that mental world, the illusion of the mind, and completely just scaring themselves out or eluding themselves out of action?
Yeah, I would say that is it. But then going back to the initial point, or one of the points I raised in this podcast, it's like, well, the culture lacks wisdom. So if the culture lacks wisdom, how can you help the collective? You know, are you now, let's say, mainstream media overly talking about celebrities, having very simplistic articles about, you know, issues that are not black and white, but they make it black and white? You know, it doesn't actually help up here. It doesn't help. So when people are seeking for wisdom, especially when there's no wisdom around them, it's a bit like I'm a lost sheep and I don't know what to do. You know, so regarding in terms of the illusion, it's like, well, there's no one. Again, technically they can go on the internet, but either way, you need that guidance, you need that push. Someone needs to push towards. So I would suggest, in a weird way, even though we live in a connected age, it feels very disconnected at the same time. It's a very strange paradox that's going on today. So
I love that.
Yeah, so that be kind of, it's a double-edged sword. Let's call it that.
I love that. So with that there, then, what's your plans, you know, moving forward into the future? And, you know, because for anybody, so first off, where can people actually find yourself as well?
Yeah, so to be fair, I'm on Instagram, but I can't remember my full. I think it's just Felipe Dinis. That's my surname. And then I'm on Twitter, and I'm also on Patreon. Just, you're probably going to put the links underneath.
Yeah, I'm going to put the links on. Yeah.
So I'm on those places. Eventually I'll be on YouTube, but I think here's a key virtue again is patience. It's always been patient with my journey. So right now I'm just being very patient and not trying to rush into things, because I want to kind of finesse certain topics in my mind before I really put myself out there. So in a very vague sense, that's what I'm trying to, do. Just be patient, keep learning, keep, progressing, keep, making money, keep trying to achieve those foundational elements. And then eventually, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, I'll put myself in a certain position. I'll put myself in some sort of limelight and, just again, sacrifice,
Yeah.
I'll be someone trying to at least provide some sort of wisdom. But yeah, Instagram, I try and I do a bit of everything on Instagram, really. Analysis of creative works. You mentioned about the churches. I kind of try and create creative works around the cathedrals. So yeah, that's where you can mainly find me anyways.
Yeah. And I know that if anybody, when people do go onto your page, instantly they'll be met with that beauty and brilliance of, the things that you share, not only just in a sense of the knowledge and the wisdom in terms of speech language, but just the visuals of the things that you share. Like, by far you are up there with whenever I see your name, whether it's on like the stories, when I see your like your name come up on the stories, or whether it's just like on posts, it's just, you instantly know, one, there's going to be value, but two, there's just going to be something which is just aesthetically indulgent. It's honestly, mate, you really do have a gift in, like I was saying, you do have a gift in your ability to articulate. Like it is so incredible, your ability to articulate, but not only that, your ability to just digest and break down such complex study and material in a way which is just so digestible for anybody to just make sense of and understand. And you can clearly tell how much of a passion it is for you. And I've no doubt the heights that you're going to reach with it, the impact, that you're having and will continue to have. I really do just feel blessed for the fact that I actually have the opportunity to just connect and, call you a brother and, network and have this type of relationship where it's only going to expand from now. I really do just feel blessed for the connection. So really just thank you. One, for taking the time to contact here. Two, for choosing to follow me back as well. I know it's such a superficial thing, like, oh, you followed us, but like, I think for me, because I seen the value that you were given, for you to then, funny enough, I look back at the beginning messages that we sent today. It was like, when did this actually start? And I know that you were saying that you don't really, you're not really there on your Instagram to follow people. And I know that you sort of like fed me a compliment back. So it's just honestly like big love, brother, big respect for everything that you're doing. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything within this. A final thing within this. What would be the final bit of wisdom? Because I know that you were saying that a lot of people, the reason why people almost feel lost is because there isn't enough wisdom to go by. But for the person listening to this, amongst the abundance of wisdom and knowledge and value that's being given throughout, I don't even know how long this has been. I can't even tell the time. My time and things gone. I've got no concept of time. What would be the final bit of wisdom that you would like to leave on the person who was made it to this stage of the podcast? What would be that final bit of wisdom to them?
Just before I say that, I deeply appreciate the kindness in terms of what you said as well, in terms of myself. Honestly, thank you very much, man. And yeah, definitely like a future podcast. I'll be down for a future podcast as well.
This is the first of many.
Yeah, amazing, man. But regarding wisdom, I'll try and make it relevant, because obviously we talked about taking action, the basic tenets, the basic foundations of life. I would say, considering our collective environment, try not to be captured by certain ideas, try not to be captured by fads, fashions, ideologies. It doesn't matter what it is. Try not to lose yourself in the source, let's call it that, and realize these ideals or ideologies or fads they're just fads. They will move on. And if you get caught in the current, that's kind of you being a little bit unconscious. I would suggest a bit of wisdom from obviously your side, whoever I'm speaking to, would be try and take a step back, try and be as objective as you can be, and whatever ideas are thrown around, kind of always question, always have the ability to critically think and recognize, look, if wisdom is timeless, let me go back to timeless sources. Now, I'm not advocating for a specific religion, but I would advocate for a lot of religions. You know, I'd advocate for, you mentioned Marcus Aurelius meditations, any sort of really strong philosophies. So kind of, this is your playbook in terms of how you can operate. So there's a double-edged sword. Once again, it's more like, be aware of your surroundings, realize there's a lot of illusion going on. There's a lot of things that, let's say, society can feed into your mind. And the things that are being fed into your mind can be not so good. But also, you still have to be proactive and try and seek for the general wisdom from the great pantheon of religions, the great pantheon of philosophies, where it will guide you towards at least a certain way of operating in a world that's actually healthier, and that actually makes you less likely to be ideologically attached. So I think that's my little bit of wisdom at the end.
Nice. I love it. I love it. I feel like I could really speak for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on end.
What time is it anyways, mate?
My phone is turned off. I can't even tell.
Yeah.
It's done. But yeah, thank you very, very much for that, brother. I know this is going to be the first of many within this. Continue just to be the embodiment of what you teach, and just continue to just, you know, share the wisdom, share the value, be the voice, and, you know, do for people in which the material's done for yourself. You know, it's continue to do it. Long may you continue to do it. I know you're having an incredible impact on people. I've got a lot of respect and love for it. So for everybody listening to this, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, whatever it is, I will be leaving links to Philippe's sort of like tags, his Instagram and all that good stuff. Give him a follow. Give him a follow. It's utilize his services that he's got there. It really is powerful stuff. But yeah, thank you for coming on, brother. I really do appreciate it. And for those of you listening to this, thank you for tuning into another episode. I am going to be getting a couple of other people more onto the podcast as well. We've got some big things happening. And just remember, you know, the mind's the creator, you are the observer, and your life can change in an instant the moment that you decide to change. Peace out.
Awake, man.
Big love, brother.
Peace out.